Happy Gregorian New Year. This is 2025, and I want to start doing more of these weekly astrology forecasts and honestly, just sharing more and being vulnerable and being honest with my own journey and how I use the astrology and magic in my own personal life and the things that I'm kind of going through. I was doing that a lot more before 2024, and I got just really burnt out, to be honest with you. I was going through a lot of my own personal struggles and I was experiencing burnout. So I took a little break off of the interview format of my podcast and just doing the monthly astrology forecast with my friend Stephanie Campos. So watch out for 2025 as well, because the interview formats will be coming back. And yeah, there's just so much that happened in 2024 and even 2023 that I haven't really shared personally because I've just been processing and really contemplating on how I want to show up moving forward. But I know for sure that I want to continue doing longer form content because I personally don't want all of my content living on Meta and TikTok, and I want to own more of what I'm putting out there. So let's start with January 1st. And again, this is the Gregorian calendar, which as an astrologer, I always look at the Aries ingress, the spring equinox, as the new year. If you didn't know, the Gregorian calendar was because Pope Gregory in 1582 changed the calendar to try to make Easter the same time every year. And so look up what this all means, because it's just some arbitrary date, January 1st. And that's why April Fools is April Fools, because that used to be the new year. And because at the time, information didn't travel as quickly as it does now because there wasn't any internet or technology as we have today, people would still celebrate the new year on April 1st. And so they would say April Fools because the new year changed. Anyway, that's some back history of why personally January 1st just doesn't make any sense, because here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the middle of winter. And so it makes more sense for the new year to begin in April, even when things are blooming again, when things are coming alive, when nature is sprouting. And I just want to bring that up because we, well, maybe I shouldn't project I want to rewild myself to the natural cycles of nature. And so if we're honoring that, then all of this like January 1st, New Year's resolution stuff, I don't know. I just don't think we should push our bodies past what they're meant to, especially if you live in the Northern Hemisphere and you are in the middle of winter right now. I'm filming this on New Year's Eve, December 31st, which is Capricorn season. And this is the time to incubate, to rest, to restore, to dream and imagine. And so I wouldn't force yourself to come up with all of these different resolutions when that's not what nature is calling for us to do. However, we did have a new moon yesterday on December 30th. It was a new moon in Capricorn. But again, I feel like it's more of setting intentions versus taking the actual action steps. So if we start with January 1st, which is the day after New Year's Eve, obviously, the moon in the early morning, 6 a.m. Eastern time, which is where I am on the eastern seaboard of the United States of America, the moon will enter Aquarius and will form a conjunction with Pluto in Aquarius. And this is very intense. This is a very deep and very intense moon, especially starting off the year on January 1st. and the moon will immediately oppose Mars in Leo. Again, that's another intense opposition. And let me just tell you, as Mars in Leo has been opposing my natal moon, it definitely brought up feelings of anger, resentment, and just these like lingering feelings of feeling triggered by things. Um, so just watch out for January 1st when the moon touches Pluto and then will oppose Mars. That's a very sensitive place for a moon to be. And I don't know, this time of year too, it's like it's a Saturn ruled season. Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn. Saturn is a little bit more melancholy and detached. You might be feeling lonely. You're reflecting on 2024, maybe some of your goals or things that you wanted to manifest or achieve like didn't happen. Again, this is more of a reflective time. Um, and just realizing that, you know, there is a divine timing for everything, as Saturn is the lord of time, and also we have free will and the capacity to change our reality in the present moment. So I'm there's a space and time for everything, and like I said, this might be a reflective time versus like running out the gate of 2025 and taking immediate action. Um, on January 2nd, Mercury finally leaves its retrograde degrees. So it will be out of its shadow period, the post shadow, and Mercury will now traverse new territory in the sign of Sagittarius. Mercury is still debilitated, depressed, and fallen in the sign of Sagittarius. And, you know, astrology is the study and observation of celestial movements and their correlation to events that happen on Earth. And I just can't help but see all of these airplane crashes and malfunctions being correlated to Mercury in its fall and depression in the sign of Sagittarius, opposing Jupiter in Gemini, in a T square with Saturn in Pisces. Because when we think of things that fly, we think of Sagittarius, and mechanical, you know, failures can be a Mercury thing. And yeah, it's just like it's not a coincidence that there were multiple aircraft malfunctions in 1 week. And so, you know, I would be cautious still, as Mercury is still moving through the sign of Sagittarius. And then on January 3rd is when we have our first big aspect of 2025. Mars retrograde in the sign of Leo will oppose Pluto in Aquarius at 1 degree. The first time this happened was on November 3rd of 2024. This was before the US presidential election. And that was when Mars was in the sign of Cancer, opposing Pluto at the 29th anaretic degree of Capricorn. And this was the last time that they opposed each other in the sky. So like I mentioned, like on January 1st, the moon was connecting with Pluto, opposing Mars. And then now Mars will be exactly opposing Pluto. This is I'm not going to lie and I'm not going to sugarcoat. This is a very activated, very fiery, very difficult transit. Oftentimes, when Mars and Pluto are in a hard aspect like this could be violence, this could be war, this could be conflict. In the mundane, in like the mundane astrology, the collective astrology, what's happening in the world, but in personal life, this could be a conflict with another person, a power dynamic, fighting. And as a part of this Mars retrograde story, this might be the time when you're like reflecting on, how do I want to take my power back? How do I want to fight back? How do I want to be brave and stand up for myself against an abusive situation? I also think this is interesting that this aspect is happening at the same time as Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni are continuing their legal battles. That whole like press tour that started all of this happened during the Mercury retrograde, that was in the sign of Leo and Virgo. And if you didn't know, Blake Lively is a Leo rising with a Virgo stellium. And there was a Jupiter and Saturn conjunct, there was a Jupiter and Saturn square that happened in August. So similar topics that happened in August would have come up December 24th of 2024 when there was the second square, again in mutable signs. And so this is another tense aspect in the sky where you are fighting with somebody, whatever your Mercury, not Mercury, see there were so many planets retrograde. Whatever your Mars retrograde story might have been about, this is the second hit. The third and final opposition happens sometime in April, but both planets will be direct at that point. So that's the biggest thing happening on January 3rd, and probably the biggest aspect to look out for in this week, because I'm only going to cover the astrology of the first week of January. Okay. And so on January 2nd, this is really lovely. Like I mentioned before, that Mercury will leave its shadow, but also Venus will enter the sign of Pisces. And this is one of the sweetest transits of 2025, I have to say, because Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces. Now, this is based on essential dignities in astrology, where planets are at home and planets have their favorite place, their exaltations. Planets are in their debilitation or depression, and then planets are in their fall. And so when planets are exalted in, like when Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces, it's because when Venus is in Pisces, all of the best aspects of Venus come out, which is why people look forward to things like this, you know? And so Venus is the planet of beauty, of love. Venus wants to form bonds. Venus wants to like do all of the Venusian things, like listen to art, listen to music, and it can do that in the sign of Pisces. So this is like one of the best transits to look out for. And so Venus will travel through the sign of Pisces like normal. Then Venus will enter Aries sometime in February, but then in March 1st exactly, Venus will station to go retrograde in the sign of Aries and then in the sign of Pisces. So starting in January 28th, you want to look out for your Venus retrograde story. But again, I'm jumping ahead just to give you like insights on what to look out for. And just as a reminder, make sure to listen to Stephanie Campos's and I's monthly horoscopes, where we go in depth every single day of the month, as well. So on January 4th, the sun in Capricorn will sextile Saturn in Pisces at 14 degrees. And this is a lovely transit. Sextiles are 60 degrees, and they're usually between two signs that work harmoniously together. So usually a sextile will happen between earth and a water sign, and fire and an air sign, because earth can give the container to water, and fire and air can give life to fire signs. And 60-degree angles are harmonious aspect. So what's interesting here is the sun in Capricorn, the ruler of Capricorn is that Saturn in Pisces. And we had a new moon on December 30th of 2024. And that new moon at 9 degrees of Capricorn was sextile to the ruler of the moon, which was Saturn in Pisces. And so this is just like the sun, again, being in a sextile relationship at exactly 14 degrees is just a nice supportive aspect for January 4th. And so whatever like Mars Pluto opposition you were experiencing the day before, this is a nice supportive aspect in whatever, if you are planning to do intentions for 2025, this is very supportive. Capricorn is the sign of long-term planning, of commitment, of, you know, also being Pisces, being Saturn being in the sign of Pisces is of belief, of mysticism, of magic. So it's a lovely transit. On January 5th, Mars retrograde in Leo will trine the North Node in Aries at 0 degrees. So Mars will hit the critical degree of 0 and it will trine the North Node. Mars is the ruler of the North Node. And on January 11th, which is the week following this one, the nodes of fate will change from the North Node being in Aries and the South Node in Libra, which we've experienced eclipses in these two signs for the last 18 months, will move into the signs of Pisces and Virgo. So the North Node will be in Pisces and the South Node will be in Virgo. So before this happens, though, the ruler of the North Node will touch in a harmonious trine. So the North Node being in Aries, like we've had to, or the invitation there was to integrate some archetype of Aries. And the archetype of Aries is of the warrior, is of the pioneer, of taking action, of leaping, of taking a risk, right? And Mars has that same flavor since, again, Aries is ruled by the planet Mars. Mars, similarly, in a fire sign of Leo, is taking action, is being courageous, is following your heart. So there is this like sweet little aspect of Mars and the North Node. And, following the destiny of where, fate has been trying to help you have more bravery around. And the Aries archetype is going to be very important for you to understand coming 2025 when Neptune moves into Aries on March 30th. Saturn moves into the sign of Aries on May 24th. And then we're going to have a Venus retrograde in Aries in March and a Mercury retrograde in Aries in March. So February to March and April is going to be a lot of Aries activation in the Aries area of your life. So this is something that I think Mars is trying to get us to have more boldness and trying to get us to take action, because also your Scorpio house, right? Because Mars is the ruler of Scorpio as well. But yeah, that was just there weren't that many transits. January 6th, Mars retrograde will move back into the sign of Cancer, but we will cover that in the following week's horoscopes. But as always, I send you so much love and Happy New Year.